Welcome to another episode of the Managing Happiness Show, where we interview successful entrepreneurs on how they manage to have a happy family life while dealing with the madness of entrepreneurship. I'm your host, David Henzel, and today's guest is Greg Raiz, a fellow YEC member. Greg is the founder of Raizlabs, which he founded in 2003 with a mission to create awesome software. And he has a special focus on user experience. Greg is also very active in the mobile and design community, and he founded DrinksOnTap, and he's a big supporter of AltConf. Greg, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Real pleasure to be here.
I always ask everybody why they start their business because I'm always very curious, what pain points you want to solve or what kind of personally drives you to start a business. So I'm curious to hear why you started your business in '03.
Sure. So prior to starting my business, I was product manager at Microsoft, and I was working in Seattle on a little operating system called Windows XP. And when I left Microsoft, I really wanted to make better software. I wanted the world to have better technology because in looking at kind of the industry and the software that companies were putting out, there was just a lack of quality. And I wanted to take some of the elements of what I learned from Microsoft in terms of the pairing of design and engineering and some of the processes and methodologies and see if I could impact and make a positive impact in the world through better software and better technology. And so I kind of set up shop in a coffee shop and started toiling away first on some of my own software products. And then over time, we started doing more and more work for companies and clients.
Did you found it alone, or did you get other co-founders on board? Did you just did you grew it organically? Just kind of first being a one-man army, and then just hiring after the other.
I started, like I said, in a coffee shop, really by myself, and I'd say in the first couple of years, I really didn't know what the company was going to do or what product or service we would provide. And so as many developers, I started scratching my own itch and building some shareware and software products and having lots of conversations. And so the first 3 years were primarily myself. And then as I started to get a little bit of traction and have some customers and clients, and it started to build on itself, I started to crystallize kind of what I really wanted to do. And so I brought on a co-founder, and he helped me with the technology side of the business, building products and services for companies. And as that started to grow, we were actually very fortunate to be kind of at the right place in the right time when the iPhone came around. And we were already doing software, and we were presenting companies with this vision of design and development, being able to produce higher quality products when they were paired together. And when the iPhone was introduced, it was just a perfect platform for us to scale and grow the company. And so in those early years in 2008, 2009, when the iPhone and the App Store was introduced, that was really a growth period for us where we pivoted the business and really started offering our services of building technology and in particular mobile applications to folks.
You mentioned that you have a strong focus on user experience, and where is this coming from? And curious.
Yeah, when I went to school for computer science, I had taken some design classes and I'd taken a lot of engineering computer science classes, but it wasn't until I went and worked at Microsoft that I saw some of the elements of user experience design. And it kind of taught me that it wasn't just about engineering and algorithms, and it wasn't just about visual design. It was really thinking about the human component and how people interact with the software and technology. And it taught me about some of the elements about user experience and usability and user interface, and thinking really tactically about how these technologies can be combined to build better products. At the end of the day, it's not always the best algorithm and it's not always the best design. It's kind of how these things are thought through from the business problem all the way through to the results that produce some of the best products in the world. And through some of that, I kind of got excited. I was like, well, why isn't every software company thinking about this? Why aren't more product companies thinking about this. And so that was some of the early days we started really focusing on delivering better products through user experience and user interface design, and how you could pair that with development as well. There's so many companies out there building technology, and even large companies. In kind of the early days of Raizlabs, we were working with Fortune 500 companies, billion-dollar companies, and their methodologies for building technology were lacking. They weren't really thinking about the user experience. They were thinking about features, and features are great, but more features don't make a better product. And by helping educate these companies, I started to see transformational changes in the types of software and products that we're able to produce.
What was the product or the app that you've put out that you're the most proud of, or some recent one that you really dig?
Well, we like to say that we're proud of all of our children, all of our apps that we've launched into the App Store. And I know we'll get into this a little bit, but we started to put more of a focus on our company's mission and vision, which is to improve lives through technology and design. And so as we've actually crystallized some of our mission and vision, the products that actually are more true to that vision end up being things that both I and the team is increasingly excited about and proud of. And so we recently did a fairly large project for the Perkins School for the Blind, and we were helping people who are visually impaired find bus stops in and around the Boston area. And so projects like that really align with what I get excited about, which is transformative change through technology with a focus on design. I'm certainly proud of that project. Some of the very early projects that we did on iPhone as well, I'm particularly proud of, because that was really trailblazing in terms of some of the things that were being done on iPhone. The very first Runkeeper, which was our running fitness GPS product, was one of the very first apps that utilized the GPS to do some of the tracking. And, previous to that, no one had ever done that on an iPhone before. And so that was exciting, but for very different reasons.
Yeah, thinking about this, it must have been a really exciting time actually being app developer and being able to use all these things that you were never able to use before, right?
It was super exciting, and honestly, it's funny because even now there's new stuff that Apple is introducing with augmented reality technology and ARKit on the iOS 11, that we still get that feeling of trailblazing and trying something that's never been done before and exploring how the technology can unlock new possibilities. There's a lot that we're seeing today with what's called Internet of Things or connected devices, where the technology costs have gotten down low enough that you can really put technology into new things in ways that have never been done before. And the challenge is, how do you do that without actually complicating people's lives? Like, people don't want more complexity, they want less complexity. So the addition of technology has to actually take away complexity, which is in and of itself a challenging problem.
Before you start talking about mission vision, is kind of the perfect segue into my favorite topic. I'm very curious to hear the mission vision and core values of your business, and
absolutely,
how you make this work.
So when, and I mentioned I started the company in a coffee shop, and when people would talk to me early on in the company history, they would say, "Greg, what do you do?" And I would kind of jokingly say, "Well, I make software that doesn't suck." And the early kind of mission vision was make software that wasn't terrible, make software that doesn't suck. And the mission vision evolved of the company. It evolved over a number of years. We started with something that was a little bit tongue in cheek. But every couple of years, we ask the question, why? And I think in thinking about the mission vision, it's important to constantly ask yourself why, because it helps put the mission vision at a higher level of purpose. And so the first time we asked the question, well, why do we make software that doesn't suck? The answer was because we wanted to focus on usability and simplicity. And we thought that software should be easy and friendly. It should be intuitive. It should remove friction. It should help help our process, help our day-to-day. It should be easy. And then we asked the question again, we're like, okay, well, why should software be easy? And the answer to that was that we wanted to build things that were awesome, that were exceptional, things that would be impactful, they would make a difference. And so we wanted to make sure that we were delivering on that promise of simplicity, not just through the design aspects, but through the delivery of real products. And so then again, we asked the question, well, why do we care about delivering great products? And the real answer to that was we wanted to have impact. We wanted to make sure that the products that we were putting out in the world were making for a better world. And again, we asked that question each year, really. And the last iteration of it has been, why do we want to improve the world? And it's because we want to improve the lives. We want to improve people's lives within that world. And we really articulated it as improve lives with design and technology. We want to make sure that we're using the tools of design and technology to make for a better world. In terms of the values, we have a number of core values, and we spent some time thinking about what are the values that support our mission and vision? What are the things that we think we need in order to improve lives through technology and design? And we really came up with 4 things. There's actually a number of sub-values underneath the core values, but they really break down into, first and foremost, excellence. We want to make sure that our team and our company, our decision-making process is anchored around building quality products, building products that we're proud of, products that have a high degree of quality. We want to make sure that the second core value is initiative. Because we're in the technology field, we always want to be pushing the bounds of technology and what these software and products can do. The third core value is impact. We don't just want to be a staffing firm or just a design agency. We want to ship products, and we want to make sure that the products that we ship are actually having a tangible and positive impact on people's lives. And the last word is team. We want to make sure that we're acting as a team and not as individuals. We're thinking about how we can be teammates both within the company and teammates to the clients that we work with to really execute on our vision of improving lives. We want to make sure that we're getting there together and not by ourselves.
Did you ever make a decision? So I see mission, vision, and values as a decision filter. So we can make sure that we're in line with what we want to do. Have you made decisions, like for example, not hired somebody, laid somebody off because of it's not in line with the mission, or not taking a client, or completely changed the product because it was not in line with what you want to stand for? Can you think of
Yeah, absolutely. We actually incorporate our core values in every single hiring decision that we make. And so we think about all 4 core values, and we interview discreetly for all core values in our interview process. We take those pretty seriously in our evaluation of team members on a quarterly basis as well. So we've built an entire performance management tool to really think about core values and sub-values, and we apply that to how we think about improving ourselves. And we think about it in terms of our business development as well, that if we really believe in improving lives through technology and design, we want to make sure that we're very selective about the types of projects that we take on, that we believe that those move us closer to our mission statement.
Yeah, it's way more fun to work on things that are actually in line with what you want to accomplish. It's more fun to get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, and it's not always easy to always be doing that, but that's our aspiration, right? That's why it's a vision statement, that you're aspirationally trying to be true to that as often as you can.
In terms of how you measure yourself, like do you measure NPS and eNPS, like employee NPS, Net Promoter Score, or that kind of what metrics do you measure for this?
Yeah, we measure the G12. Are you familiar with that?
No, never heard of it.
So the G12 stands for the Gallup 12, and it's 12 yes/no questions that you can ask employees that measure engagement. And so that helps us really determine how engaged our employees are and how aligned they are with the mission and vision of the company, how engaged managers are in terms of their day-to-day, and if we're really building a great company. And so G12 measures the relative proportion of yeses to nos. And so it consists of very simple yes/no questions, like someone at work cares about me as a person. Yes, no. I have the tools to do my job. Yes, no. And so it really distinctly tells us, okay, well, people are saying they don't have the tools to do their job. Well, why is that? Does someone lacking a design tool? Does someone lacking a desk or a chair? Like, what do we need to get to 100% on that particular G12 question? Sometimes the questions are harder to get perfect scores on. Like one of the G12 questions is, I have a best friend at work. And so that's always one that's kind of a challenge. Well, your best friend may not work at the company. Well, how do you make sure that you're creating a dynamic and a culture where people can have more friends at work? Because friends at work help create a culture that has each other's back and cares about the work that we're doing, and it's more of a team mentality. So we use G12. We use a number of other tools. We've tried using NPS, and that may be something that we come back to as well, but it's not something we currently use.
Okay, that's really awesome. Thank you very much for this tip. I'll definitely check this out. It's from the Gallup Foundation, the StrengthsFinder guys.
Yep. They came up with it a number of years ago, and there's a lot written about the G12.
I'll definitely check it out. Did you do the StrengthsFinder test to see personality dynamics in teams? Have you done this with your?
Yeah, we've done varying types. We've experimented with DISC and Myers-Briggs and things like that. We've done it more with our leadership team than we have rolled it out across the company as well. But I think it's an interesting tool especially to understand communication styles and communication differences, because in doing it, there's definitely different styles and different ways people like to be communicated to. And it's very apparent when you start seeing deltas in people who are creative versus people who are kind of financial. Like there's very different personality types that are attracted to different types of work.
The former president of Rackspace, Lou Mormon, used to be on our board as an advisor for MaxCDN, and he was the total fan of the StrengthsFinder methodology. At Rackspace, everybody had their strength profile on the back of their name tag and on their desk, so every employee could, when they, when you meet somebody, you talk to somebody, you just like turn around the name tag and see what type of personality he has, making communication much easier and knowing who you're dealing with, especially at Rackspace with like several thousand employees.
That's interesting.
But
I think that's certainly an extreme way to do it, but I think it's really important that people do know how to communicate with one another. Some folks really like face-to-face communication. Some people really enjoy Slack. And when you're working in a company that has a myriad of personalities, from designers to developers to product managers, just understanding how to be effective in your communication is really important.
We didn't go that far. We just did the tests with, we just did the tests with our employees, and was really extreme how spot on these tests were. For example, one of my guys, he had the Midas touch with hiring, and this was, I think, Relator is his key strength, and this tells that you're good at picking people for jobs. So this stuff really works.
That's cool.
I want to talk to you about AltConf, because you're very big on AltConf, and I think it's a really cool conference. How do you get involved, and tell the audience a little bit about AltConf?
So for folks who are not familiar, Apple hosts an annual conference called WWDC, and they've been hosting it for a number of years. They typically limit the attendance to about 5,000 people. When the iPhone started to get popular, the development community for the iPhone started to grow and swell, and the competition for WWDC tickets started to get fierce as well. And so prior to the iPhone, it used to be very common to see the same people year over year. And so there was very much a community around Mac development prior to the iPhone. And as the iPhone started to get more and more developers, it started to be more challenging to have that community because the people were cycling every year because the tickets would be on a lottery or on a first come, first served basis. And so the AltConf group really started informally. Rob Elkins started this group a number of years ago. I want to say it was either 2013 or 14. And it was really kind of a pop-up conference initially to have talks and presentations from non-Apple people. We got involved as a company the following year, providing light sponsorship, and then more actively involved in years after. For us, our mission vision, as I said, is to improve lives through technology and design. And we don't believe that we can build all the software and technology in the world, but we want to influence better software and technology through our community. And so we've had just a great time supporting the AltConf community and some of the myriad of designers and developers who participate and help the community get better. We want to make sure that everyone has a voice, and that even while Apple caps their community at 5,000 people, we make our conference available for people for free. And so people who want to participate in the community, either through attending or through speaking or through just being part of the mix, we make it very accessible for people to go do that. And so that group has been growing year over year. And it's a really successful conference. It was actually officially part of WWDC. It was kind of an extension that Apple recognized last year. So we're very excited about that as well.
That's awesome. It's also really awesome that you take your mission and vision and, express it in things like this as well. So it's, everybody on the team is really, supports this and with a lot of pride. And
when I talk to new employees about our mission and vision, I actually say that it has to start personally. That if you're thinking about mission and vision and improving lives, so the first person whose life you should improve is your own. And thinking about, what should you improve about your own life through design and development? Like, is it sending your kids through college? Is it paying off a loan? Like, what is the thing that's going to make your life better? And only when you've figured out your own life, then can you think about your team or your company or your community. And so the outer rungs of impact, which ends up being things like community or global outreach or open source or other things like that impact many people outside of your own direct circle of influence, they're very exciting things to do, but you can't even get there until you focus on yourself.
100%. You have to be okay. You have to be strong for yourself before you can be strong for somebody else. You have to take the oxygen mask that comes down in the plane on your face first before you help your daughter sitting next to you. So I think it's really, really important that you have to clean up in front of your own door before you can, otherwise don't go anywhere else.
Exactly.
That's really segues nicely into what drives you personally. Why do you do what you do?
Well, I think, what drives me is certainly, I do want to live in a world with better software. I'm personally frustrated by the technology that we have. And I tend to, my background, obviously working at Microsoft, I used to nitpick operating systems for fun. And so that's kind of led me to really think critically about all sorts of technology and software that we have and how it can have a better impact and effect on our lives. There's so much software being built today. There are probably thousands of folks listening to this podcast, and many of them are probably working on various pieces of technology or entrepreneurship ventures. There's more software being developed now than ever before in the history. And the question is, how do we build better software, not more software? If we can really figure that out and start to have a conversation about that, I think it'll produce better products, it'll produce more meaningful products, and it won't feel like, a barrage of buttons and options and features, but things that actually help the user experience and help me in the day-to-day get back to life and spend less time in front of a computer.
Yeah, also, I always think about how can you do things at scale? How can you actually reach as many people as possible with, how can you have the biggest impact? And I think pushing AltConf is definitely something where you can educate more and more people to actually build better software. Did you ever think about like kind of putting together online courses or like more, I don't know, like some ways of, I guess, user group? You already have like this DrinksOnTap. I guess that's already something that goes to the same direction. Like kind of thinking about scale, like how can you scale this and
yeah, I mean, it's something I definitely think about because I think building community is a really hard thing. And actually, one of the reasons I'm on this podcast is that oftentimes it's easier to reach an established community than to try to bootstrap or build a new community from scratch. I think there's a lot of companies and lots of communities that are really interested in building, whether it's building themselves to be better individuals or building better companies or building better technologies. And so it's just starting to have a voice around user experience and about software and about quality and excellence as opposed to features and timelines and deadlines and things like that. That a lot of our clients are focused on, well, I have these 20 features that I need to get done. And at the end of the day, most companies don't actually care about one feature or another. They care about moving the line on their business. They want to have a positive impact, whether it's revenue or retention or onboarding or some other metric. And so it's trying to have better conversations around the things that actually matter and fewer conversations about the things that are superficial.
How do you convince the customer of, kicking out a bunch of features and focusing on the essence? I guess this can be sometimes a pretty tough conversation.
I don't think it's it's really a philosophical thing. And I think in terms of trying to get someone to be philosophically aligned, I don't try to change their philosophy. I try to allow them to understand mine. And, I certainly, I understand waterfall and I understand the methodology around features and why features are compelling. Features are typically compelling because they help a sales team sell against features, especially when they're going head to head against a competitor. But features aren't typically the thing that helps you retain customers or helps you improve your net promoter score in a product or helps people, tell their friend. When I use a product that's fantastic, it's usually because they got the details right of something that everyone else had the same features, but they didn't get the details right. And so those are the things that typically set folks apart. It's not, the 90th or 100th feature. Things that make Amazon great isn't the 5 billion buttons that they have on their checkout. It's the one feature, which is they have a large catalog and things arrive very quickly when I order them. Like those are two features that are very well executed.
Matter.
Yeah, those are two features, selection and delivery speed that matter a lot. And I'm willing to forego the 9 billion other features that Amazon might have that aren't as instrumental to me. And the same is true about lots of different products, right? You think about Word. Word has like 5,000 toolbars and buttons. And typically it's not the 5,000th or the 6,000th button that makes a difference one way or another. It's some of the subtle details of how it does, whether it's spell checking or autocorrect or something else that allows me not to think about the software.
Oh, yeah. Don't get me started on Word. I think Word is it's really hard to use. Like I switched to Google Drive a long time ago, and I will never go back.
Right, because it's not the features, right? The Microsoft engineers are concentrating on more and more features, whereas the one feature that's really valuable is collaboration, and that's the one that they haven't really figured out.
No, the company that bought us when we sold MaxCDN, they forced us to use Microsoft, the Office suite, and we attempted to use the online, like the Google Drive.
Yep.
How do you say? Like the Microsoft version of this. And this was such a bad experience that I think 50% of the gray hair that I have result from this was so bad. It felt like we had a few people that left the business after the merger. Like this was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back for a few. It was really, 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 really terrible.
Yeah, and that's honestly one of the, that's keyed off of the G12. Like, I have the tools to do my job. At the end of the day, people want to have the tools that they think are the best tools that allow them to do their job. And if they don't have the right tools, it just makes work harder for no good reason.
It's awesome. Thanks again for the G12 trip. I will check this out as soon as we're done with this podcast. Going to the final part of the podcast, it's about your family and how you manage family life while being the CEO of a company. But maybe let's start with a quick overview on how your family life looks.
Yeah, so I have I'm married. I have 2 kids, a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old, both girls. I don't think there's a magic bullet, for listeners to a podcast such as this. I think it's desirable to think that someone has all the answers, and I'm probably here to tell you that it's hard, and it's hard for everyone. And the biggest challenge, and I was mentioning this kind of before we started recording, is that in running a company, and certainly not just for CEOs, but anyone in either a leadership track or a startup that is requiring a lot of your time, you're used to kind of having your way, certainly as a CEO, kind of either being right or helping lead the decision making. And some of the elements of leadership that help you in a company may not be advantageous to you in personal life. And I have to remind myself that I shouldn't want and position myself to win every time. It's not about winning. It's, how do you create a partnership, and how do you work together, and how do you solve problems? And my wife stays at home. She also teaches piano lessons and does some human resources. And so, I have to kind of keep in mind that the balance that she experiences is different than the balance that I experience, and just making it a conversation. And I think that's important, that we hear each other. It's not always sunshine and roses. Sometimes there's challenges, and I certainly get asked to travel occasionally, and the travel is sometimes hard on both of us. And so it's really, how do you have that conversation and have honesty and transparency about those things? There was a business book that I read that was actually helpful in running my business, but it helped me also think about just some of the communication styles that I have at home as well. And there's a book called, let me see where it is, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. And it talks about how you can build trust and build commitment and communication, and then have accountability. And I've certainly used some of the principles in the book across my team and my leadership team, but it also helped me recognize some of the elements in my personal life as well, that, if I'm either being held accountable or trying to hold someone accountable, or I have, certain expectations, if I'm not being communicative about those expectations, or we're not having the discussion about the commitment, or we haven't verbalized the commitment or had healthy conflict, then we're really creating those personal dysfunctions, and we're just going to frustrate each other. And so it's really, how do you have healthy conflict and conversations and build better trust and be vulnerable? And so
this is how Managing Happiness was born. I came home from a roles and responsibility meeting, and then I was at home on my couch, and I told my wife, like, hey, honey, Emma needs a diaper change. And this really upset my wife. And I thought, why are we fighting? Like, it doesn't make any sense. She does it most of the time to change her diapers, and I'm totally cool with doing it. But what was irritating me is, like, how should I know that it's my turn now? And then I realized that we never talked about roles and responsibilities. And the next morning we sat down and wrote them down. And this took away all these unspoken expectations that we had of each other, and brought a lot more peace into our relationship. It was like really, really big for us. And this is how I started the whole thing. And going back to your the thing that you said, not being CEO at home and not being, kind of having your ways, or kind of calling the shots. A friend of mine who's also an entrepreneur, he struggled with the same thing with his wife tremendously, and they actually got a divorce, and he's married again. And when they decided, they set some ground rules for certain areas where they are responsible, basically areas where they have the final say. For example, car-related things is always he is calling, he has the final say. His wife can influence, but he has the final say. Everything regarding home interior, he can influence, his wife has the final say. So kind of by dividing this up and having the conversation about this and setting these roles and responsibilities, or these areas of, what's the right word? Where they call the shots, like took away a lot of the headaches that he had in his previous relationship.
Yeah, I mean, and it's really about communicating expectations and having that transparency. And it's not easy. And like I said early on, like I have not solved all these things. I think every entrepreneur has to, and it's also not a, hey, I've solved it. It's something that you constantly have to be thinking about and working on.
It's same in the business. You never solved it, right? It's like always kind of improving and tinkering and making it better. It's kind of like always the same with your personally should always grow. Family or relationship should always grow. Business should always grow. Otherwise, it's not fun anymore.
Exactly. It's definitely you need to keep the conversation going. You need to just continue to reevaluate both your work and business and home and personal and time commitments. And the thing is that because the business changes, your personal allocations and your time commitments can change as well. And so my wife certainly recognizes that, sometimes the business goes through some ups and downs and it needs me more. And there's other times that my wife needs me more. And just having that be a frank conversation is probably a good thing for everyone.
Yeah, a friend of mine has, when they have launches coming up, he communicates this to his wife, and his wife knows that, like, the normal rules don't apply until, the release is out, because launches can be very stressful. And before they always had, like, a lot more friction, but now it's just clear that this is the seasonality of the business, and, it's a little different from time to time.
Yeah, absolutely.
You already mentioned one of the books. I always ask everybody, what are the 3 books that influenced you the most in your life? And what is the last book that you've read?
So I'd say How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie is definitely one that I think it influenced me a lot, actually, even before I started my business. It was something that I read and helped me think about personal relationships and communication and things like that. I mentioned the 5 Dysfunctions, which I think is it's an interesting read. It just helped me think about the team dynamics, and I actually took my leadership team on an offsite to go specifically work on some of those elements. And for me, it just helped transform my communication style with my leadership team. It created a lot of trust and accountability. So I found it incredibly helpful. And the last book that I thought was, yeah, go ahead.
I'm curious, like, what was the thing that you really changed after reading this book? What was, like, the key takeaway that you changed in your leadership style that had, the biggest improvement?
There's a number of things that changed, but I think it was really understanding what some of the dysfunctions were, because there was a lot of, I would say, politics. And I recognized that there was politics, and I didn't understand why. And it was honestly very frustrating, I think, to everyone involved. And so we started to identify just through reading the book and having an outside facilitator talk us through some of the interpersonal dynamics that we had, some of the reasons why we just weren't communicating. A simple example was something that we as a leadership team were doing often, which is called triangulation, where, I might tell you about something that, Sally told me. And so I'm speaking on behalf of Sally, and you're hearing it from me. And so you may have a triangulated relationship where you might be upset at her, but she didn't even say anything to you. So now you have this different relationship. And so even by knowing that that can exist, change their dynamics. And so now I'll sometimes say, like, look, don't talk to me about someone who's not in the room. Like, go talk to them directly, because that removes the dysfunction. It prevents me from having a judgment call and being frustrated, or you being frustrated at them. It helps us have transparency and honesty and healthy conflict. And so it's the difference between healthy conflict and unhealthy conflict. Like, we can argue about, should we do this podcast or should we not do this podcast? But then once we both agree, like, okay, we had the argument, but now we both agree, let's do this, then we're both committed, and then we go do it. But sometimes you won't have the conflict. And so, you may have two people doing the podcast, but one person really feels like they got roped into it and they weren't really committed to going and doing. So they'll kind of do a poor job of it because they're not giving it their 100% because they weren't part of the decision of saying, let's go ahead and do this. And so getting true commitment from folks to say, like, yes, I'm committed, I will go do this, is very transformative. And helping identify and give people a voice, that everyone speaks on our leadership team. And I want to make sure I've heard all the opinions, even if they don't agree with me. And then I ask, okay, are we committed to this decision? And then if we are or we're not, we can really have that discussion about it. So things like that I found to be really helpful, and it removed removed a majority of the politics across our team, which was really great.
It's really big. I often work with companies to help them to craft their mission vision statement and to kind of make sure it's being implemented in the business, right? And one key thing that I always do is I have everybody in the company participate in terms of giving feedback on what they think about mission vision. And so people feel like they had input and it's really their core values, their mission, their vision, that they have buy-in. And then it's actually way more likely that you're going to implement this versus if it's just coming from up top, say, hey, this is what we're doing.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. And we do that on a number of things, but if it's yours, you take ownership for it. If it's top down, if it's imposed on you, it's easier to kind of reject it and say, well, that's not me. That's not what I agreed to. So it's been a good book. And then the last one I would say is Work Rules. And so that's a book. It was written by Senior Vice President of People Operations at Google. And so it had a lot of kind of inside tricks on how Google thinks about their human resources and their people operations, which I thought was really insightful, just in terms of some of the tips and tricks and things like that. And in terms of books I'm reading, I just finished a book called Beneath the Scarlet Sky, which is kind of a World War II novel. It kind of tells a backstory of how I won't give it away, but it's a fascinating book based on a true story.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm always looking for new books to read. I'm a huge book nerd. This was really awesome. Thank you very much for being on the show and sharing your journey with your company and your family. Do you have anything that you need, that you're looking for, open positions or something that you want to tell the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. We're hiring for a number of roles. And so if you kind of aligned with our company mission vision of improving lives through technology and design, we're looking for folks in iOS development, Android development, web development, and product management. And we're looking for folks both in Boston and in Oakland, California. So if that sounds like you, or if it sounds like someone who you might know, we actually have a refer policy as well that will send you on a vacation to somewhere nice and warm if one of your friends ends up working here as well. So if you're interested, definitely get in touch. Our careers are posted on our website. Hopefully we'll make a link available at the show notes.
Absolutely. We'll also put the link to your mission, vision, values, and I assume you have it on the website. We'll put it in there as well. I'm so curious to check it out.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they're on the website. They're kind of internal, but I'll see if I can make a PDF or something available.
This would be awesome. Cool. Craig, thank you very much for being on. It was a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Awesome.